Welcome everyone to what I hope to be an exciting and educational series on Lean Six Sigma. This will be a 7-part series that we will be looking at different aspects of Lean Six Sigma. The 7 parts include today's introduction. Then we'll be going through the deployment platform called DMAIC, which is define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. Those are the next 5. And then the final part of the series will be something on the tools that are necessary for you to implement and follow through with the Lean Six Sigma program. So we'll identify practical uses and principles and tools, and then hopefully what we will do is find better ways to improve patient care. So what are we talking about then? Lean is, by definition, more value for less work. What are the wastes, variations, and lags that are creating a loss in value for your customers? And I think that's really critical to think about. Is there waste in every process that we implement and that we follow through on? It's been suggested that every process is designed to get the outcomes that it wants or that it's designed for. And what does that mean? Is there waste that's included? And is there variation which creates less value and more work for what goes on? And then when we talk about this, what is lean? Lean is about reducing waste and increasing value to the customer. And I think that's really critical. And I do believe lean is, in fact, effective for the medical practice. There are 5 principles of lean, which is, and I've used the word value before, but let's talk about value that is defined by the customer and then delivered by the producer or the provider. The value stream is the set of actions or the tasks that occur that go through the entire process. The flow is the idea of how smooth it flows, the workflow from point A, which an example would be the patient coming to the office, checking in, all the way through, seeing the provider, and then going to checkout. How smooth is that process? And in doing that process, is there something called pull or push? In other words, every step along the way is ready to receive the prior steps work, as opposed to having someone wait to get to the next step, which would be pushing the system. And then the ideal principle of lean is that we be perfect. Well, okay. So value stream, flow, pull, and perfection are 5 basic principles of the lean world. So that's lean, but what's Six Sigma? Six Sigma is really looking more at errors and defects and broken pieces and parts. And Six Sigma basically says that there are 3.4 errors per million incidences. Now, you may look at that and say, well, okay, we'll never get to Six Sigma because we never have 1 million instances. But if you think about it, a patient registering, how many potential errors are there on just that one form of that patient? Well, maybe it's 10 forms, maybe it's 8 forms, maybe it's 10 forms and 6 is adequate. But the point is that there's a lot of points there along the way that could cause and create an error situation. So when we think about it, and I like to look at it this way, lean is how efficient we are, and Six Sigma is how effective we are in terms of really kind of what goes on. So in order to put all this together, one of the things that I think is critical is to think in terms of a structured approach. And I like to look at different deployment platforms, which we'll talk about. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll follow through with define, measure, analyze, improve, and control, which is a DMAIC deployment platform or the PDSA deployment platform. And for our purposes in this series, we will be looking at the DMAIC model, but there are applications and the DMAIC steps all fit in with the PDSA as well. So DMAIC, defining the condition, determining the cause, developing solutions, developing action plans and implementation, improvement modeling, and then verifying and supporting the results, and then doing it all over again. So the idea of DMAIC is that you go through each of these steps in some organized fashion, and that each step builds on what you got from the prior step. There's sort of a pull kind of a model. So defining, and again, we'll go through these in a lot more detail in the next parts of the series. But in defining it, one of the things that's really critical is that you take the time to really define the process. Make sure that there are boundaries and that you're not exceeding and having what we call process creep or scope creep and that sort of thing. You're going beyond the scope of what you're about to do. Measure, very simple, just simply looking at the data that's available to you. Analyzing is analyzing and taking apart that data, making sure that data is practical and useful. And I think that's a critical part, as well as then moving, once you've analyzed it, you can come up with the solution. So what is the improvement aspect that you'll be looking for and that you've gotten from using the various tools to that through the measure and through the analyze phase to now achieve an improvement strategy that makes sense. And then finally, the control phase. And the control aspect really is where many times we fall down, because once we do an implementation on a change, we think that it's going to be done and we don't necessarily follow through with it. And I think it's really critical that we do that. The PDSA or PDCA platform is really a lean platform. So when you're thinking about this, one of the decisions that you need to make in your organization is whether you would follow DMAIC or whether you would follow PDSA. I have no recommendation. I just simply think that it's important that you have a structured use and follow a defined pattern. So the PDSA, plan, do, study, or check, act. And so the plan, okay, that's the define. But it also relates to measuring and analyzing. So you're in the PDSA component, you've taken the first three aspects, DMA, kind of put them together and come up with a plan and identifying what you think will happen. The do part is really sort of like a pilot test, or where you conduct a test to check out what your improvement strategy might be in terms of kind of where you want to go. And so you're improving and you're doing at the same time, but you're doing it in a pilot model. The study would be, let's analyze what we've done. What are the results of this sort of activity that we've put together? Has it met our objective? And if it's met our objectives, then we develop a way to roll it out to the rest of the practice. And in rolling it out to the rest of the practice, then we actually then start to implement. And that's where we act. And the key on this, again, is we prepare for acting. We actually follow through, making sure that our change that we've identified is in fact a practical change and kind of moving forward. So we've got these two deployment platforms, the DMAIC, DMAIC, or the PDSA. And again, there's no recommendation that I would make for you to follow through with any or all of them. But the idea is that you need to say, in our organization, we prefer to follow and use this deployment platform as our way of addressing our project work. Well, what does that mean? Actually, think about this, that there's a process that occurs every time you see a patient, every time you submit a claim, every time you go through a prior authorization process, every time you hire a new employee, every time you order a new supply. And that's a process that goes ongoing. It's continual. And that is what we really want to take a look at in terms of where we want to go. And one of the keys on this is that as we think about this, it's the process itself that's the problem. It may not be the people. It could, in the process itself, let's say we're checking in and out a patient. Well, that's understandable, and it's not necessarily as efficient as it could be. So are you going to blame the people, or should you blame the process? And I think that's really, really critical for you to understand. And it has been said, and through the analysis and work in this arena, that about 85% of the problems that occur in a process are oriented to and done based on the design, the functionality of the process, not the people. So it gives us a good opportunity to take a look at that. And So how are we going to do that? Well, we've talked about our deployment platform, but let's think about this as a project. And the project is something that has a beginning and an end. A project is something that we look at and says, okay, what are we going to do to take apart this process? Or maybe what we want to do is narrow our scope in our defined role, and we're going to narrow our scope to fix one part of the process, and that we can't always fix or can't necessarily fix the entire process itself. So we really then have this discipline of project management that is important for us to look at. So let's think this through then of applying what? Okay, the DMAIC model, the PDSA model, using a deployment platform, following specific steps, taking those steps, building on those steps to increase and improve the skills and the knowledge that's available to our team, and apply those to fixing the process. That exactly is what the whole concept is all about. So I think it's really important that we look at this. And the project management is really a good discipline that looks at time, cost, and quality in terms of what the issue was and then what we've been able to do to actually fix it. And to kind of conclude this particular session today, I want you to think about the fact that, as I mentioned, you take apart that process, you don't fix the entire process necessarily, but let's find the biggest bottleneck, the biggest barrier, the biggest point of waste in the process that we have and fix that. And then what do? We forget about it? No, let's do what we call continuous process improvement. That means we continually look at what we have and how we might go about where this whole picture fits together. So the key of what we want to do is to take and develop a culture, a philosophy, an attitude that says we need to continually work to improve our processes that we have. And again, a process would be a patient visit, would be a billing cycle, would be a prior authorization, would be hiring an employee, ordering and supplying, stocking the supplies and equipment that we would need, and so on. Each of those are different processes that we would want to take apart and take a very serious look at. So what I hope that you're getting out of this is today is an introduction to the whole idea of what Lean Six Sigma is all about. And then what we want you to do is please follow through and listen to or view the following 5 or 6 additional parts to learn more about the DMAIC PDSA kind of approach to improving patient care. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Please make sure you share your thoughts and feelings with a lot of others and encourage others to listen to this series as well. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. And I hope that you've gained something out of this and that you will continue to view and listen to the rest of the series. So have a great day. Thanks.